Well, in the news this month, the large volcanic explosion in the South Pacific near the Tonga region. We have seen extreme seismic activity this year, this calendar year, in that region. There was some warnings. There were small quakes that were happening there. Many of them weren't being reported. Then there was a small, they call it an underwater eruption, but how far underwater are we talking? Now, the problem with underwater eruptions, if they're deep underwater, you may not even know they are happening. If they happen in shallow water, the mixing of water with volcanic contents can be very explosive. Water turned to steam in a matter of a half a second is explosive. The mass to volume ratio is huge. And they captured the eruption and the explosion. Many people in the region lost contact with their loved ones. Several people are missing. A 4 to 5 foot tsunami was created, which isn't really that big, but it will still kill you. Remember, 4 feet of water is above your waist, okay, and it's rushing water, and it's endless water. It seems endless. It could come in for hundreds and hundreds of yards, a quarter of a mile, a half a mile, and then turn around and take you right back out to sea. So there will be debris, there will be strong currents. It's not as devastating as a 5 foot, 6 foot, 20 foot tsunami, but it's still a tsunami. It still is an ocean that comes in. And we had talked about this for quite some time about the increase in volcanism. We showed you now how the ongoing eruptions, it's really weird, this pattern that we had globally. We had a sudden surge, mainly in the lava eruptions. Remember when Kamchatka Peninsula had 3 or 4 volcanoes all erupt at the same time. Lava eruptions. Very, very rare, hardly ever seen in our lifetimes. And here it was happening in 2011 and 2012. So we found that quite astonishing. And it was a precursor of things to come. Before too long, we were averaging about 30 to 40 eruptions in 2 months. Well, our average used to be, and you can still find this online, the old data, 60 eruptions on average a year, including the ongoing eruptions. Well, when you have 60 in 2 months, planet Earth, you have to ask, what is happening? And so we followed this pattern, and what we were seeing were small to moderate eruptions of all these volcanoes. We see volcanoes that were dormant, no longer dormant. Geysers in Yellowstone that were dormant, no longer dormant. All of Yellowstone's long period geysers had gone off in a span of 4 or 5 years. The geyser times had to be edited to hide the sudden surge in geyser activity throughout the entire Yellowstone Park. We see but all of these eruptions were small to moderate. We weren't having any VEI 6s or VEI 7s. These were 2, 3s, and some 4s. But then something happened. The lava eruptions became extreme. We saw Hawaii put out its largest lava field ever created in modern day history. At the exact same moment, Bartabunga, Iceland, was putting out one of the largest lava fields ever seen on planet Earth. Not just for Hawaii, but for planet Earth. Happening at the exact same time. You want to call that a coincidence? Where once-in-a-lifetime occurrences are happening at the exact same moment? So, and the way to hide it, the USGS, the volcanism projects, the Smithsonian, all just kind of never made a comment on any of this. Well then, and something weird happened in the last 2 years. The frequency, since Planet X passed by us in 2019, the frequency of these eruptions went down. And some of these volcanoes, these lava tubes, these magma chambers sealed themselves off. They cooled down, but yet whatever was creating the internal heat had not gone away. We had kind of turned down the temperature near the crust of the earth and sealed off these volcanoes. So what we told you in 2019 and 2020, what this channel told you, was that to expect fewer eruptions, but more explosive. And indeed, for a time period, we saw fewer eruptions with more explosive eruptions. And then we had, of course, a temporary surge. People started talking about it. You know, the Ice Age people were talking about how we were breaking volcanic records. Finally, somebody's talking about it. And this is the way that controlled disclosures happen. The government waits until it's too obvious that something's going on, and then they start writing about it and making comments about it. And 9 times out of 10, the headlines read, "Scientists mystified, baffled." You know, scientists are not mystified and baffled. There's very few logical reasons why all the volcanoes on planet Earth suddenly one day start to act up. Very few things can cause that. And people say, well, it's just a cycle. But you know, everything has a reason. And saying it's just a cycle is not a reason. It's a description. But it's not a reason. Why are there cycles? And when you have cycles of 600,000 years that are periodic, and you can trace them back, 3 or 4 cycles like Yellowstone, you can trace these back, you're like, well, what on earth would cause a 600,000 year cycle? Well, if you factor in, let's say, an orbit of a planet that's a secondary sun that disrupts our tidal influences, disrupts the electrons pouring through our Earth, disrupts the ground currents, disrupts the magnetism, disrupts the tidal forces, changes the direction of some of our tectonic plate movement, and then creating more and more and more earthquakes. If you know, divide 600,000 by 5,000, and all of a sudden your period doesn't seem so long. Well, you know, every 12,000 years is just 3 or 4 passages of Planet X. So, and Planet X, not a planet, it's a star, a failed star, our binary twin. So the Tonga volcanic explosion is a precursor of what to expect. We always thought of Tonga as being a super caldera. Well, I always thought of Tonga as being one of the super volcanoes, where inside this massive caldera is a complex of smaller calderas, stratovolcanoes, shield volcanoes, and some of them underwater. Now, so this is what you should know, is I'm hoping we have more to cool the Earth down. And because of these huge Arctic vortexes that have now replaced our jet stream, we see huge cycles of air coming down from the Arctic, bringing cold air down as far south as Baja, and taking warm equatorial moisture up as far as the Arctic Circle in Greenland. So we have cold air coming down to places that should not be receiving it, and now we have hot air going up to places that should not be receiving it. The problem is, when people try to deceive you, is they always focus on the cold temperatures but ignore the painfully obvious. And when they admit to the painfully obvious, the incredible ground temperatures exceeding 40 degrees above an average, I mean, that is so beyond imagination. What would do that? to our planet, where all of a sudden we start seeing all over the world ground temperatures that exceed 40 degrees above an average ground temperature for that time of year. What would do that? And there's only one explanation: the sun. What would heat the ground? What else is heating the ground? Carbon dioxide? So, we could sit here and talk science all day long, and there will be people that always will try to confuse you and debunk. But the bottom line is this stuff is happening. It's happening. And we always thought and felt that if we were getting closer to this crunch time, where things were getting so out of control that we were losing control of our food supply, that we were losing control of our climate, that animals would start dying off in epic numbers, not by the tons, but by the megatons. Where plants and trees would not die by the millions, but by the billions. And that is happening. Anybody out there want the links to the megatons of billions of dead animals? Just ask for the links. I don't make a habit of posting links because 9 out of 10 people won't click on them. And there's we right now have gone over 75,000 man hours in producing these videos. 75,000 man hours. And it's my expectation of you that if you watch these videos, is that you help me in the endeavor of making sure those 75,000 hours weren't a complete waste of my time. Since 2010, we've had this channel. Now we're getting another computer back. We had the hard drive extracted. On that hard drive is tons of data, tons of music from Todd. We have tons of Mars anomalies that we're going to repost and try to even do a better job of rendering those photos. A lot of that is forthcoming. I hope, every time I open my mouth, something happens and it makes me a liar. But I'll keep my fingers crossed and you keep your fingers crossed. Now what's going on today is we're seeing still overall a downtick in the number of eruptions, but an uptick in the explosiveness. Now the Canary Islands, Las Palmas, remember they were talking about tsunamis, and we kept putting out videos on Patreon and other platforms other than YouTube that Las Palmas cannot generate a mega tsunami for one reason: the water around the cliffs was too shallow. It's a very shallow shelf, and you cannot create a 100-foot tsunami in 30 feet of water. It just can't happen, and it's impossible. So when you start seeing some of these alternative explanations, alternative conspiracy theories that kind of throw you off the trail of the real and actual theory, the alternate theory. I'm trying to give you some examples. 9/11, all of a sudden, scalar weapons were used. Forget the thermite, right? And forget the time detonations in slow motion. You can see them progress. You can see the progression, just like dominoes, right? Another one, the Las Vegas incident, where there was a bunch of people that were injured and killed as a result of a shooting. First it was Muslim, then it was Antifa, and then it was a lone crazy gunman. So we had all these three conspiracy theories to throw you off the fact that it may have been a false flag, because it was foretold on a posting on, I think it was 4chan, where somebody said this is going to happen in Nevada, that there's going to be a mass shooting. And so then it happened. And people profited from that. People short sold the MGM stocks and made millions, tens of millions. One of those, it's been confirmed, was Soros. So we see alternative conspiracy theories every time they blow a false flag. And so we've seen this with what's going on in the solar system and on planet Earth. The carbon dioxide is one huge misleading alternative theory because it does not raise your ground temperatures 40 degrees above average. Take a blow dryer and try to do that. But then, get a microwave and see if you can heat that bowl of water faster than you can with a blow dryer. This isn't rocket science. And yet, they still feed us. And to hide what's going on, there's scientists all over the world taking measurements and documenting the actual hard data. And then it's when that data gets presented to you, wrapped up in a conclusion that is a false narrative, that we kind of get thrown off the trail. But we always said that we would be able to know when we were getting close to a tipping point, where humanity really would be on the brink, by the actions of man, by the actions of government. We would see things would change. Things would become very different in all of our lives. And I ask you, how different does this world look than the world of 2018 and early 2019? How different does it look? And it looks terribly different. We are so divided, and hatefully so. The degree of censorship is Stalin-like. The persecution of alternative theory and thought and the suppression of free thinking has never been under assault any greater in America than now. We see a medicine being pushed that, if you look on the databases, show that right now probably over 1 million deaths attributed to that medicine. Add to that another million from this laboratory created disease. That's 2 million people in 2 years just wiped off the planet Earth that never would have, they would still be here today. Now, when things get tough and you're on a life raft and there's only enough food for 5 people, yet you got 20 people on the raft, and you're all starving, you're all dehydrating, we're all dying, somebody's got to survive. We can't all die, so then only the strong survive. The weak get kicked off the raft, and the strong take control of the food and water that's remaining. That is what happens. Unless, of course, all 20 people join together and attempt to do something about it. The raft itself with a tarp can become a water still. Sunlight hits the tarp, evaporates the water in the raft, the water drips down into a bowl, and all of a sudden you're creating your own drinking water. Well, it may not be enough, but it's a start. It's a plan. And what else can you do? Well, you have a few rations. So let's make a fish trap. Let's take this tarp. Let's float it flat. Let's put a little food in the middle. And when the bait fish come up to nibble, we just raise the tarp and start harvesting the bait fish. Sardines, anchovies, mullet. It may not be much, but it's a start. You have a knife, attach it to a pole, make a spear, attract the smaller reef sharks. You know, you can eat shark. So where there's cooperation, there's hope. And the problem is we, I mean, 7 billion people, with our hands, we could solve these problems. We could solve the food shortages. We could solve the water purity problem. We could solve many of these problems, the illness brought on by the radiation. We can solve all of these problems. But when there's billionaires standing in the way who don't want to lose their income, you know, if all of us grew a garden, what would be the demand for produce? The demand would go down. Then the billionaire food holders, the food controllers, they don't want that. You know, and I look at some diseases. You know, there's some diseases that are billion, $1 trillion industries. Well, if you could go down the street and for $300 a month, treat your own disease better than they can with lesser toxicities, well, why wouldn't, as a globe, we want to do that? Oh, there's billionaires. You're threatening their income. So there are solutions to what's happening. There are answers. But it takes brave, intelligent, free-thinking, hard-working people to put forth the truth and bring you the data at a time where data is being censored unlike never before. Or is it ever before? So, and the gardens are hard to grow. You have to, when they tell you it's going to be 34 degrees, you got to plan on it being 28 degrees. You got to plan on freezes coming and prepare for those freezes when they tell you it's not going to freeze. Anything around 34 degrees minimum, 35 degrees minimum deserves respect. And we pointed out how the temperatures that get reported are being modified. They're being softened so that people get caught off guard by some of these weather events. Especially the freezes. Now, what, you know, and then when they do happen, every single liar on planet Earth says, well, look, we had a freeze. We had an ice storm in a place we've never had an ice storm. Therefore, what? We're going into an ice age. That's not proof of an ice age. It's proof of huge Arctic vortexes plunging cold air further south than it's ever been. That's not an ice age. That's climate change. So today, we see the sun getting more sunspots. We see more CMEs trying to push and expand this heliosphere that will try to push all these extra cosmic rays in the solar system, trying to push them away from the sun and from our magnetosphere. Today, the background stars are a little bit more luminescent. Pleiades is just a little brighter than it was 2 years ago, because we are slowly pushing out these cosmic rays from the solar system. The background radiation, when the sun had 0 sunspots, the background X-ray radiation was a factor of 10 higher than it was 2 years prior. We're talking in 2018 and 2019, during solar minimum, all of a sudden, what happened? We had background X-rays at their highest levels that we've seen in quite some time. And then when you get sunspots are always an X-ray source. So the more X-rays you get usually is an indicator of more sunspots. But when there's 0 sunspots, there's a clue of what's happening. There's a clue to why there's so much volcanism. When your X-rays are 10 times higher, from 10 to the minus 9 to 10 to the minus 8, on the X-ray scale where they're measuring very, very powerful X-rays, close to being gamma radiation, 0.1 nanometers to 0.5 nanometers. We're seeing extreme ultraviolet go up. We're seeing regular ultraviolet going up. We see some visible light frequencies going up. We see some visible light frequencies going down. The green going down. Why is green light going down and violet going up and red going up? Well, it's all, there's answers to all of that, and nobody's tried to bring you those answers except for this channel. And so we stand alone, and that's why we were taken down. But mainly over the cancer videos. I've been traveling those last couple years. Been talking to people who know people who know people in Google. I was told that some people in Google did not want my channel taken down. That they were afraid for their own family's future and had nobody telling them the truth about what was happening, and secretly they would watch our videos to get the real truth about the climate, about the volcanism, about medicine, about disease, about cosmic rays, about the sun, everything. And now, when we go on to some of the NASA videos, holy cow, they're talking now about the creation of our solar system. And they're talking about an impact scenario on all planets. Remember, we made several videos about Saturn and how Saturn's structures can all be explained, the moons, the rings, as a collision-based origins. How our entire solar system may be a collision-based origin. How all the comets and asteroid belts may be collision-based origins. And now, finally, because the evidence has been in your face and so strong, NASA cannot lose credibility with its own scientists, and now are talking about collisions. But again, no disclosure is a full disclosure. It's bits and pieces. So when you look at a NASA video, there's one that says the collisions on planets, planetary collisions. They'll go through all the planets and talk about how they all have evidence of catastrophic collisions, and they represent them as all different collisions. But these are things we've been reporting on for now 5, 6, 7 years about the collision origins of planet Earth, Venus, and Mars. The collision origins of the asteroid belt and the comet groups. We pointed out on how much water was in our solar system. People were amazed at how much water and marvel at how much water is on planet Earth. But now we see moons, Europa, that may have oceans underneath the ice. We see geysers shooting thousands and thousands of feet, if not miles, into the solar system. Geysers, not only on moons around Jupiter, but on moons around Saturn. And even Neptune may be a giant watery planet. So it's all starting to make sense. The extinction cycles. So, the last unanswered question. Are we in our 6th major extinction? Some people say yes. I'm here to tell you no. We're going through a minor to moderate extinction. We're not going through a major extinction. each time Planet X comes through, the debris fragments become smaller. Planet X, which really a star, degrades a little bit more each time it reaches perihelion to the sun. It loses mass. It loses energy. It changes its orbit. And so here we see that we still have ice caps. And when those ice caps go away, we will be in our 6th major extinction. But they haven't gone away. They're still there. There's, a fraction of their former selves. But as long as we have ice, we're not going to have a major extinction. Right now, we're seeing a moderate extinction. And many universities have documented this now because it's in your face. You just can't ignore the obvious as a scientific government body and not lose credibility. It's in your face to the people who do the research, to the people who are the scientists. So, if we get near the tipping point of this moderate extinction, we said we would be able to tell. So, you can tell how close we're getting to a tipping point on planet Earth by how desperate the billionaires act. And if you are one of those pre-programmed people that turn on the TV and believe everything that comes from your favorite newscaster, good luck to you. I wish you luck. And I'm kind of envious because you don't spend the nights laying in bed wondering what the next move is. You don't spend your nights wondering what you need to do. You're just going to be waiting like a sheep and just being told what to do and just saying, hey, throw me a bone. Just throw me a bone. Leave me alone and throw me a bone. I'm a good little sheep. And nobody's saying that's the wrong path to take. But if it's brought by deceit, if that brought by evil, then your opinion and your actions and your thoughts may start, or let's put it this way, may stop becoming your own. And so you have to be responsible. You have to grow food. You have to, raising chickens is huge. I know more people now that are raising chickens than ever before. They're not eating the chickens. They're eating the eggs. They got chickens that produce an egg a day. So imagine if you had 3 or 4 chickens. You have 3 or 4 eggs a day. Sustain those chickens. Let a few more hatch. Then you have 5, 6, 7 chickens. Pretty soon, you'll have more eggs than you can consume. Now you have a trading commodity. So, take responsibility. Don't just put yourself in a comfortable little bubble. Because I could promise you, that bubble is already uncomfortable. You already have your rights taken away. You are quarantined. You're not allowed to travel. You're not allowed to work if you don't comply. What kind of slave state does that sound like? So that's why we've been saying for 10 years, be prepared, not scared.